I'm David, also known as DSP, so everyone can avoid trying to pronounce my last name. And I'm one of the co-creators of MCP and a member of technical staff at Anthropic. And I just want to give you a rough overview of the protocol, of the current state of the project, and then hopefully for the most part, this is probably just like mostly me rambling, and I try to not run my mouth too much. Okay, so as we're getting like nearly to the 1 year anniversary of MCP on November 25th this year, I just want to take a little bit of a look back at like where we are with the ecosystem, with the protocol, and most importantly with the community who has really helped build this massive ecosystem. And I think I'm very, very happy because like from my perspective, right, this couldn't have gotten any better, right? There is like 10,000 plus MCP servers in the wild of various quality. But it's an ecosystem that I think within 10 months is quite substantial, that how much every one of you all have built together from like within that 10 months. And how much of these, you know, at least I use daily and a lot of people use daily. So it's really an amazing thing what we have done in terms of the amount of servers we have built, the amount of clients we have built. And so a big shout out to everyone who has helped really kickstart an ecosystem of that size and really make sure that we have something that we can use on a day-to-day basis and help integrate our AI systems a little bit better. And then with that, I think over the last year, and particularly in the last 6 months, there was an increasing amount of more and more clients. When we started a year ago, there was obviously Claude Desktop, not even Claude AI, it was mostly Claude Desktop, and an integration to that were really the main clients that you had available. But there was very little else. And today we're looking at a wide variety of clients that really support more and more of the features in the protocol and continue to keep up with the protocol as it evolves. And so as when we looked at the first iteration of clients, you know, looking at March, looking at April, you saw a lot of like pure tool use clients, and now we're seeing clients to really implement all these other features, be it elicitations, be it resources, and so on. I want to give a big shout out particularly to the Visual Studio Code team, who's been always at the absolute forefront of implementing features there. In addition, when we started, we had 2 SDKs that we wrote. We had the Python SDK, we have the TypeScript SDK, and then the community came really together to start building a lot of really well-maintained SDKs by now. Peter did not mention that he literally kickstarted the C# SDK that then Microsoft took over and helped to maintain, which is a really great showcase of what this community can do. Is like you can do something as a person, and a big company comes with a language team that is specialized in that specific language, takes it and moves your SDK forward. We had the Java, the Spring AI folks build the Java SDK, which is really, really popular, and so on and so forth. And most recently, we had just yesterday the 1.0 release of the Go SDK, and I know a lot of people have been waiting for that, and Google has been very deliberate about this, and maybe a little bit slower. But overall, I think this is in a really, really great state now. And then lastly, we just added a PHP SDK as well. And so we have now a really wide variety of SDKs, of the official SDKs. And then there's, of course, 10,000 other SDKs of various quality. And then in addition, like when we started the like MCP, and we didn't have like we had a repository of like, here's the MCP service you should use. And that's a great thing if you have 500 people do this. It's not a great thing if you have 10,000 people building MCP servers or 10,000 MCP servers. And so it became very quickly needed that we have like some central place. And in the absence of such a central place, we had roughly like, I don't know, an estimate of probably like a gazillion registries pop up that to the point where we had memes of people building registries of registries because there were so many MCP registries. And one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we want to, on one hand side, have a central place for people to go and put MCP servers and can discover MCP servers, but not take away from the curation and other aspects that some of these registry add on top of it that can be a great value add to some people. And so we have a registry API that is a centralized registry that you can use today. And we have an open API spec that you can implement in the hope that if clients implement this registry API to pull down and search for MCP servers, then you can swap in and out different registries, including like a private registry you might have internally. So that's, I think, going well. There's lots of ground to cover, but we're getting there. And one of these aspects that we really, and I mentioned this just briefly, one of these aspects that I really want to have from this registry is getting to the point where we have not just a human select in a very traditional sense, which servers they want, but if you have a full API, a centralized place that every client can look at, well, then what you can do is you can have your agent look for the servers that are most appropriate. And that's really the spot where hopefully in a year from now, where a lot of these clients will just implement the registry API and have agents look for the thing that is best suited for the task that you currently have, install the server, and you can then use it. So that's just roughly the ecosystem. I think we're in a really, really good spot. There's things I want to talk about around like quality of servers, features in clients that I wish to see improved. But overall, we have built really the beginning of a very strong ecosystem, and it's now for us to move it forward, keep that momentum going, and making sure everyone gets the most use out of it, and that we're careful around some of these implications that come with a big ecosystem, like supply chain attacks and other aspects that you will see pop up, and you have seen pop up recently, that just inherently come from such a big ecosystem. On the protocol side, we had 2 new versions, which if you have ever looked at standardization in general or protocol development in general, is exceptionally fast. This has benefits, this has drawbacks, but really the main idea here is that at least I'm personally, but certainly also the team at Anthropic, is not particularly interested in spending hours and hours and hours in governing meetings and design discussion forever. What we're really trying to do is make sure that at this like incredible speed the AI industry is moving, that we're trying to keep up, but that we stay exceptionally practical and useful to everyone as much as possible, so that these things we're putting into the protocol are really things that you actually want to use. And with that comes faster iteration speed, but so far it has worked, because one thing it is, and at the same time very important to us, is all of these are actually somewhat backwards compatible. And so yeah, we had two big versions, the June version and the March version. Those had some very interesting big changes. We first and foremost reworked in March some of the big problems we had in the protocol with SSE streams. This was a design decision that we just based on how like APIs or model APIs worked at the time. And I think it was very clear that we need, for scaling up MCP, to go more towards a stateless world. And we introduced this thing which we call streamable HTTP, which is basically a form of HTTP post plus optional streaming. And there are still issues, and we're going to talk about this, that people face in deployment, and that's the next step that we're going to go and hope and work out. And then, of course, we kept standard I/O. That's, I think, works for the most part. There's still some frustration that people have when they have libraries that accidentally print to standard out, and that breaks the clients, and there's some frustration there. But I personally think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I do feel that standard I/O works quite well. And that is obviously something that was heavily inspired by LSPs and other similar techniques that you see in the world and widely adopted. We had a bunch of work on authorization because my initial work on authorization, I got it wrong. I'll be very honest, I did not fully perfectly understand all the deep intricacies of enterprise authorization. I'm exceptionally happy that a bunch of very, very senior people from the OAuth community, as well as from like large IDP providers like Darren from Amazon, Dan from Microsoft, and like Aaron from Okta came together and really helped us sort this out. And I think we're in a way, way, way better spot. And we're really leaning into OAuth, and we're hitting some of these like fundamental challenges in OAuth that we're still luckily having these like exceptionally smart people in the authorization space help us sort out and sort through. And so I think if you look back of like the changes we have made over the last 6 months, I think we're getting into a really, really good spot that is significantly easier, both for people to deploy on the internet, but also particularly for people to deploy internally. And I've seen some very large deployments and surprisingly big and old school companies that are working surprisingly well, where you log in with the OAuth, the platform in the back does token exchange and then hands off an API token to the MCP servers, and it works all very, very seamlessly. So I'm very, very happy to see that that works. There's still a lot of work that we need to be done. There's 2 big points that are problematic. At the moment, there's very little support for really fine-grained auth. You can technically do it, but there are some questions around how clients can reason about this. And then most importantly, and we can have long discussions around this, in the absence of a better solution, we leaned into something called dynamic client registration, which if you have ever dealt with, you probably know all the problems with it. It's quite a problematic specification that we're using there that causes a lot of issues, particularly for smaller startups that are not able to go to some of the big providers who are actually not really using DCR and they are effectively whitelisting people. And I think there are some challenges. And here again, we're working with the IETF to go and fix this. And then of course, in the core, we have done a bunch of cool stuff. We have added structured output, we have added elicitations, resource links, and a bunch of tool annotations. And these are used in various forms. I think there's still a lot on the client side to catch up, but there's some really fun stuff you can do with these. Okay. On the community side, we have we have really grown the community in the beginning. It was a very small group. Now we have like an open community Discord that you can join and participate. We're having notes from the developer meetings up on GitHub, and really trying to run this as a truly, truly open source project in a very old school sense of how you would see like a Python or PHP kind of be run in a way. And with that, we had a ton of like growth and maintainership, both from companies, but also individuals that I'm exceptionally happy about, and really have made it possible to build this ecosystem and move the project forward, and had some really amazing input into our decision making. I give you an example, like, somebody for example, from Bloomberg, this like just gave me a lot of information of like how things work in the financial sector, and like having people from big companies bringing their expertise into the open source community. I'm really, really excited about it, really, really happy. And with that, we have moved away from the team at Anthropic just decides what's happening to really form a governance model that contains people from OpenAI, Microsoft, AWS, Google, and Anthropic onto like a small board that does the final decisions. And if you're interested, that's the 8 people that are able to make the final decisions on a lot of these specifications. And then with that, we have a growing set of maintainers that really help to keep that community going. And I want to particularly shout out to the community managers like Ola, Tadas, Cliff, Sean, and I probably forgot some. They do an amazing job keeping the community clear and nice and happy, and free of spam. If you do spam us, you're gonna go get banned instantly. Okay, but what we need to do in the future, there's a lot of stuff ahead, so that's all boring stuff. You'll hopefully know some of that. There's a ton of stuff we still need to do. We're a large open source project now. We have tons of repositories, we have tons of engagements, and with that comes a lot of interest that we have a hard time keeping up. I'll be honest, if you put up an issue today on an SDK, it is hard for us to get to really manage to get to it. And that is not because your issue, that we want to ignore your issue. It's just a matter of like trying to scale in a very, very short time to a size where we can be like feel confident that everybody involved is competent and wants the best for the project, and then have enough people to really get into this, right? So that's something that we're really, really hard working on, and we're seeing improvements there. And the same goes with this like specification enhancement proposal. So we added this like idea of like, okay, you can go and make proposals to enhance the specification, and the core maintainers go in and vote about this and think about this. But that's actually a fairly tedious and kind of hard to scale process, and we are slightly drowning in the amount of specification proposals, and that's something that we really need to figure out and really need to understand how we scale the project. And so if you want to be an active part in this, if you have a deep understanding of open source communities and how you scale this, be part of this and help us, right? And that we're really looking constantly for contributors, be it people from other companies, be it people that are just want to be there as individuals. And with that, of course, we want to provide additional clarity around some of these SDKs. So if you go today to the Model Context Protocol website, that's very hard for a person to understand how well supported is one of these SDK. Like Microsoft did an amazing job with the C# SDK. Other SDKs are maybe a little bit slower in supporting all the features. And it's very hard for you to understand which one is better than the others. And so we will introduce a tiering system that will say, this is a top one, tier one SDK that will always follow the spec within 2 weeks, that has all the features, that is well maintained, well supported. And this is a tier 3, all the bets are off, use it at your own, thing. And so I think that will help allowing you to make better decisions about how we're gonna use these, to use these SDKs. And then again, in order to scale, we really want to invest more into more powerful and more autonomous interest groups and working groups. I'm a very big fan of fairly high agency and autonomous groups, and so I really want to lean into this. And I think the financial services interest group from Bloomberg and some others, I think, are first iterations of this. Okay, I'm probably speaking too long, but whatever. He's not going to kick me out. What's gonna happen soon? So there's a new release on November 25th. This time around, we're doing something different. We're gonna, for the first time, introduce a 2 weeks period where the specification will not change, hopefully, and we ask everyone to implement the specification as fast as possible and really, really test the new things that we add to the specification and tell us where we fucked up. Because this will happen in certain corner cases that we didn't anticipate, and we want to know. And we really, really, really want everyone to go out there, test it before we put it into a specification. Adding to a specification is easy. Removing it's very hard. And I really want to make sure that we keep this backwards compatibility guarantee that we have for now. And in order to do that, we need everyone to tell us if there's something that doesn't work in this 2-3 weeks period where the specification doesn't change much. And of course, our main focus are 3 areas. Asynchronous tasks is a great proposal from folks at AWS that look into how you can have long-running tasks and how the client can display these and what the underlying protocol changes are for this, that I think will solve a lot of problems that people currently have, and is one of the most requested features I'm hearing. The second part is, and there's a great proposal from Google here in this area, is statelessness. I think we heard a lot about issues, and we'll hear a lot about issues and challenges in deploying MCP servers at scale. And so statelessness, making it even more easier to deploy servers, I think is one of the big hot topics, and one of these discussions that's been going on forever. And I think we're hopefully honing in on a solution that everybody will be happy while still maintaining some of the abilities that MCP inherently had, where there is ability that you can send server side from the server requests elicitation. And we want to keep some of that because we truly believe that in an agentic world, it is not just a REST API. I think there's more to it, and we have had long discussions. We have had, even in March already, when we did Streamable HTTP, long discussions around WebSockets, which we discarded of various reasons. We had REST, a pure REST API, as an option that we discarded for a lot of reasons. And I still, until today, stubbornly believe that I think these bidirectionalities and features like resources, prompt, elicitation, sampling are actually very, very useful in the long run. And I don't want to over-focus on just tool use for now, because the protocol is still young, and I think we're still exploring this agentic space. And then lastly, there will be like a little bit of addition of like server identity, so making sure that servers can give information to clients in advance without the client having to connect in the first place. This will probably come in the form of like standard well-known URLs that you're all aware of that just contain some structured data, and that's something we will put in. And then on the community side, or on the ecosystem side, I think that's the most interesting part. There's some really, really, really cool stuff that's going on that we're trying to figure out, like how do we work it out and in the project, and how do you want to run this project. There's a really cool project called MCP UI that I'm personally quite excited about, and that I think is very, very useful for a specific use case in the MCP ecosystem that I want to make sure we put somehow into a place that cannot be the specification, because it turns out not all clients can render HTML, including Claude Code. And so we want something that people that have clients that can do it have like a somewhat of a standardized way how they should do this, that we really encourage people to use. But it's not really like in the specification. That will be what is probably like an extension pattern. Financial services will probably fit into the same, as well as some of these like authorization aspects that are very, very important for enterprises, not so important for everyone else. And then last but not least, I think in the ecosystem, there is a problem of MCP server quality at the moment. A vast majority of the MCP server qualities were put together the servers were put together very quickly without much intent. And I think you can see this in the quality. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done here in the ecosystem of like, how can you measure, how can you eval things, how you can debug your MCP servers. And so there's a lot of, to a rich ecosystem belongs a rich set of tools that people have at their hand to make the best decisions, okay? And that's something we need to go and build. So there you go. Okay, with that, I'm over time, but I want to show you one or two cool things. The first thing is, there's a few things that I'm personally excited about. This is complete rambling, has no structure, but here's a few things that I'm very excited about. We added this thing called structured output last June, and very few people have noticed it and have figured out what you can do with it. There's a very, very smart person called Eric Meyer who has seen this very early and asked for us to add structured output. He's a computer science professor. You can look him up. He is quite famous for this, for a lot of the work he's doing. And then recently, Cloudflare took some of these ideas and made a quite good blog post. And so what it is, hey, if I take, like, you know, an agent, for example, like Cloud Code today, and have it execute a complex set of command line tools, like for example this is great, right? And you see this Cloud Code do all the time, and you're like, oh, this is cool. It combines a bunch of data. Using command line tools is really, really, really powerful. Well, it turns out you can totally do the same with MCP today if you were, instead of considering tool calls as a singular thing that the model does once at a time, that you consider tool calls nothing but a remote RPC interface, right? And what you do is like, okay, I can have the model generate some code for me that uses structured output to understand its return values, and now I can reason about the types that come back, and I can put this into code, and I can then construct code that does exactly the same as what you've seen before in a command line, but you could do it all in code and use MCP tools under the hood. And that's some of these ideas the Cloudflare blog post goes into, some of these ideas Eric has thrown around before, and I think it's super powerful, but something that I just don't see people do yet, and I'm actually quite surprised people don't do it more yet, because I feel this is to me at least, somewhat obvious. So that's one aspect. The other aspect that I wish people would do more in this whole MCP thing, where they can really like start distinguishing themselves from just the average tool call thing that we see in the wild, is like, okay, we can do the same with resources, right? Like resources are these things that exist in MCP servers that are somewhat underused. I think MCP UI is going to heavily lean into them, so I have hope for that. But if you really, really think about what resources are, they are nothing but a remote virtual file system. And it turns out that models are really good at dealing with the file system. And so you could totally generate code that deals with resources as a remote file system. And I think that's something that people have not explored yet. And here in this example, you're like, why do I not just load a remote resource from an MCP server as a pandas frame, right? And then interact with that. And one other thing that I think a lot of MCP server authors have not really, I've not seen them do much, is you're completely able to expose the same data as a tool and as a resource and let the client decide what the fuck do they want to use. And I think that's quite cool. And I wish I would see more MCP server authors expose raw data via resources and then use tools for the standard interaction. And what you can also do with resources, you can then take them and slap them into a RAG pipeline on the client side and already pre-select some of that and have the client being really, really powerful about how it selects its context. Okay, and then with all of that, my very last bit before I head off and let the next person speak, is this other thing that people came up today. It's this idea of tool selection, discovery, that I think a lot of people currently have because we have seen this massive explosion in MCP servers. And it's one of these super interesting problems I think we want to talk about. And there's, I think, two sorts of ideas in the wild. There's this idea of like the protocol needs to support some form of filtering and searching for things. And I think that's valid if you had so many tools on a server that you need to do the server side. But I think in the vast majority of deployments, I think we could do better as client authors. If you build a client, clients are actually somewhat easier at the moment and not really distinguishing themselves, but like adding a lot of smartness on top of it. And I do think we can do better here. You know what turns out to be really good at selecting tools? The model, right? Like why don't we treat this problem like a standard RAG problem? A RAG is what people sometimes claim, but I think it comes back in form of like, how do I select the tool very smartly? And why do I not just take the list of tool descriptions, throw them into a RAG pipeline, and then select them on the client side for the use case at hand? And I wish more clients would do that. Cool. And then we can talk about security a lot. I have my takes, but I think we're coming out of time. I'm happy to talk in the hallway about security forever. And then there's unsolved problems that we still have. We still have this problem that some of them mentioned before about context, about model specific descriptions. I think we understand that models need different prompting, and at the moment the protocol has no ability for you to do that. And then lastly, I think that's the same about like context length. We do want a bit more control on the server side over how much context has been used up. Okay, and with that, my 25 minutes talk went to 35 or 40 minutes. Sorry for that. You'll find me in the hallway. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for building.